So I watched the movie Man on Web today. Wow, this is either the worst or second worst movie this year for me personally. There was so many issues with this movie that I have. Now there's two positives I'll say about this movie. The guy who plays Uncle Ben, I think he does a good job playing a younger version of Ben. He's not given the best material to work with, and some of the dialogue is just really bad in this movie. And I'll get into that with the negatives. But I thought his character was the only one that actually felt like a real person. And I think overall, when it comes to like what I would imagine when it comes to a younger version of Uncle Ben, I think he does a good job with what he's giving to do in this movie, which isn't a whole lot. The other positive, and this is the main positive about this movie, is that I think this movie is one of those movies that has an interesting concept if you like put it on paper. Like if someone comes to me and says, we're gonna do a Final Destination version of a superhero movie, I'll be like, okay, that sounds cool. Like we haven't seen that type of superhero movie before. But the execution is so bad in this movie. I'm gonna get into all the issues with this movie. But when it comes to the concept, the idea of the movie, this is one of those movies that that is so bad with one of the reasons being that you had such a great idea and concept with this movie. You really could have made something interesting and cool and different from other superhero movies, but the execution is just so bad. So that's another positive. Is that I think the concept, the actual idea, sounds interesting on paper, and I think if you had a better director, better writers, better acting, editing, and all that, this could have been a really cool, good movie. So now I'm going to get into all the negatives with this movie, and there is a lot. This movie is so barely directed. There's times in this movie where the director's like trying to do this like zoom in and zoom out thing. I'm just like, it just feels so amateur directed in this movie. And the camera's like shaking over the place, especially at the beginning and end. I'm just like, this feels like somebody who's never directed anything before. And I know the director of this movie, I don't remember what her name is, but I know she's only done television work, and this was her first time directing a movie. But this felt like this was directed by somebody who's never directed anything before. Like, this is the worst directed movie I've seen this year. Like, I'm watching this movie, I'm going, like, the way the camera's moving and zooming in and out, I'm just like, this came off like an amateur director who just never directed a single thing in their lives. And look, I hate saying that stuff about a director who's only directed, this is the first movie this person's ever directed. But this person has directed some television stuff too. So, but it just felt like I've never seen a movie directed so poorly before. That's also why I can't blame the studio completely on this. Like, look, I can definitely say one of the other issues about this movie is that it feels like the studio messed with the movie. I know the director talked about that in interviews. You had Dakota Johnson who quit her agency and then got a new agent after she got hired for the movie. She also talked about how the script changed. So you can definitely tell it was a movie that was messed with. Like, it feels like Morbius was a movie that was messed with. But I can't blame the studio completely on this. I can say some of the issues definitely comes from this movie feeling like the studio messed with the movie. But the directing is so bad in this movie. And the dialogue is so cringy and bad that I can't blame the entire studio for this movie. Like, there is some poor directing in this movie when it comes to how it's directed, how she's using the camera in this movie. It's like, it feels like this is somebody who's never directed a single thing in their lives. Is the way it comes off, the directing. The editing, I think, is just jarring and terrible in this. And the way they're like trying to show her powers with how she can see the future with these flashes, it gets so repetitive. And the editing for it is so bad that I'm just like, this is just poorly. Again, the idea could be cool in concept, but the way it's edited and the fact these flashes get so repetitive, it just doesn't come off. The execution isn't good. And like I said, the dialogue is so cringe and bad. There were so many scenes in this movie where I'm just like, people don't talk like this. Like, this feels like this movie, the dialogue in this movie was written by AI. Like, by a robot who doesn't know how people talk. Like, there's lines in this movie where I'm just like, oh god. And the delivery is so bad. No offense to Dakota Johnson. I think she's actually a good actress. but her acting in this movie comes off like somebody who does not want to be in this movie. And even the promotion for the movie, it kind of felt like that way to me, where it seemed like she didn't want to be in this movie. And again, she says the script changed, but it doesn't even feel like she's trying in this movie. Like, her performance is so flat. And there's moments where it's trying to be funny with her character with this really bad cringe dialogue, and the delivery is just like the comedy in this movie, when because there's moments where I can't even tell if it's trying to be funny or not, because how bad it is. So it just, and the three girls, the girls who played the three teenagers, three Spider Women, I didn't think they were very good in this movie either. I mean, the one girl who was in Anyone But You, I liked her in that movie. This is the second movie I've seen hers. She's the one that plays the nerdy, shy girl, and I didn't buy on that role at all. And the characters just aren't very compelling with the three girls. Like, I never feel like I get to know these characters in this movie, except for like a personality trait they all have. Like, you have this shy, nerdy teenager. You have the one teenager who's really smart and really good at science, and then you have the one black who is kind of an asshole, and seems to really gets loves food a lot. She has like a line in the movie. She goes like, she tries to combine hungry and angry together, where she says, "You wouldn't like me when I'm hung angry," or something like that. I'm just like, dialogue like that is just. And the villain in this movie, oh my god, it's one of the worst villains I've seen. And the whole idea, this is one of the issues I also have with the movie, with the story part of it, is that in the movie, the villain says he sees in the future that these three Spider-Women kill him. And he says he has the same dream every night. Here's some logical problems I have with this. Why doesn't he just leave the building? Because he's saying it's the same dream. If you I could understand if he's saying no matter where he goes in his, like, no matter where he is in the dreams or what the place is, location, that he dies anyway. But he says in the movie he has the same exact dream. So why would you stay in the building when it has the glass that you get kicked out? And also the way he dies in his business, I think is just stupid. But you get kicked out. Like, why would you stay in a building? Why would you stay in New York? It's just logical stuff like that. It just makes the script writing so bad. And the villain's not interesting or compelling. He's basically at the beginning of the movie, in the opening, when he kills Madame Web's mom. His whole thing is that he just wants to Spider for the superpowers. I'm just like, so he's just somebody who's out for power. Wow, I haven't seen that before with a villain. It's just the villain in this movie is so bad. Here's another thing. No offense to the actor. Like, I've never seen an actor in anything else but this, and he might be a good actor. But his voice sounds so boring. And this is one of the other really bad things about this movie. There's a lot of AR with the villain in this movie, ADR, where when he's talking, the lines aren't matching his lip movement in the movie. A lot of times. It's like one of those things I'm watching, like when I'm watching the movie, I'm just like, okay, when you see him talking, it's like they dubbed his lines or something. Like, this felt like a movie that did have reshoots, because I'm just like, why aren't the lines with the villain matching his lip movement? It was so obvious ADR in this movie with the villain, with the dialogue. Like, again, no reason why I can't blame the studio tie on that, because this movie is so poorly directed, and they're not given anything to work with when it comes to the script. And another thing why I can't completely blame the studio on this is that you had the writers who wrote Morbius. Why would you bring back the writers who gave you a bad movie in your universe already? And these are also, and when you look at these writers, they're the ones that wrote the Power Rangers 2017 movie, which I think is the best movie. Which I don't love that movie. But I do think it's a fun movie. And they did Dracula Untold. It's like a guilty pleasure, decent movie for me. Again, it's not a great movie, and there's a lot of issues with that movie. And there's just, you look at the track record, I'm just like, why would you hire these waiters again? So the dialogue, I don't think Dakota Johnson. I think it feels like in this movie she's not even trying. To me, the three girls, like I said, they all have just these personality traits, and there's not much else to the characters. I never cared about what happened to them. I didn't feel invested in any of the characters. And here's another thing. I understand that the director says she was trying to not have too much acid in this movie. I don't have a problem when a comic movie doesn't have a lot of acid, but when you have bad and cringe dialogue and you don't feel any investment in the characters and the story's not compelling, then you better have some at least decent acid. And the acid, there's like barely any acid in this movie. And the acid we get in this movie, I don't think is very good. It was shot very well. And the way the villain dies at the end of this movie, I'm just like, that is so stupid. Madame Web discovers later on she can be in multiple places at once, but that's kind of a cool element of her power. But she kills the villain by him falling off and a piece of a sign falling on him. And I'm just like, that is one of the dumbest deaths I've seen for a villain. He also never came off like a threat to me. I never felt scared of him as a villain. Like I said, he wasn't very interesting. And the editing is just bad. I'm not really a fan of the way it's edited with her powers, where I can see in concept what they were trying to do. And also the Madame Web character, she kind of comes off like an asshole for most of the movie. I mean, in the beginning, the kid gives her like a pistol, and she's super awkward about it. And I understand they say she was in a foster place when she was raised since her mom died. But there's even a part later on where she's like, after she saves the three girls, she's like, "Oh, I'll drop you off with your parents." I think she says that later on again, and she just comes off kind of like an asshole to Madame Web character. Like, I get what they're trying to do for a story, her being a reluctant hero that's forced into this, but I didn't buy in the chemistry between the actors. I didn't feel like there was a connection there, and her character just isn't, personally for me, very likable. Like, you can do the whole idea of having a story where you have a reluctant hero who is forced into this situation, but I didn't care about her character. I didn't think her character was very likable at all, like I said. And Aston, I think, is pretty poorly shot in this movie. It's just so... And I'll be honest, I wasn't a fan of the villain's costume. It basically looked like a Spider-Man's costume, but a darker, blacker version. And this is the other thing. I was never a fan of the idea of doing this universe without Spider-Man, because here's a problem when you do a Spider-less universe. When you take characters that are connected to Spider-Man or related to Spider-Man or a villain of Spider-Man, when you take those characters and you don't have a Spider-Man in this universe, it just comes off awkward and weird. There were so many moments in this movie where they're about to reference Spider-Man, and then they go, like, there's a moment where one of the Spider-Woman characters is like, well, when they're talking about the powers of what the villain has, they're like, so he's like a spider person. I'm like, oh my god, this is so cringe. This is stupid. And there's like a moment where they're trying to guess the name of the baby, and we all know it's Peter Parker. So I don't understand why they're trying to make it like a big thing in the movie when it's like, everybody knows the baby is going to be Peter Parker, Spider-Man. And then there's a scene at the end where she's like talking about Uncle Ben with how he's gonna be an uncle with no responsibility. And I'm like, oh yeah, teasing Spider-Man because Peter loses his parents and then Uncle Ben has to be responsible for taking care of Peter. It just makes me go like, why are you trying to do a universe when all these a universe without Spider-Man when all these characters are connected to Spider-Man in some way? Especially with characters, especially with the villain who basically looks like Spider-Man, but a black, darker version of his suit, and all have the same powers as Spider-Man. I mean, the whole time to begin with these Spider people, I was like, oh god, this is stupid. It's just not very good. So overall, I hate crapping on a movie so much, and look, do I think some of this was studio interference? Do I think, this movie was messed with when it comes to the editing, and it was probably reshot a couple of times? Yes, I do, but at the same time, this is the worst directed movie of this year I've seen. Like, the directing is just bad. How the actors are directed in this movie, and just how the action scenes are directed, with the very few you have in this movie, and just overall how the movie is directed. Period. it really felt like an amateur person who's never directed a single thing in their lives. And I get it. This is the first movie she's directed, but she has done television stuff. So I don't understand why the directing is so bad in this movie. So overall, I can't recommend Madame Web. Like, I would say don't bother watching this. I mean, this to me is the worst movie in the Sonyverse so far. Like, say all you want about Morbius, which I think is a bad movie. That movie's awful. But at the end of the day, I will say one thing about Morbius, because both movies feel like they were messed with, is that Morbius at least was directed better. I'll keep saying this. The directing in this movie is bad. Like, it's just like the way the camera, they're using the camera, how she's directing this movie is just like, I haven't seen a movie this directed, direction wise, this bad in a while. So like even a movie like Morbius I think is crap. I would say that's slightly better than this. I mean, the only thing I give this movie that I can say makes this movie slightly. The only thing I can say about this movie where I can see the argument, if you wanted to say which one is worse, is that yeah, I'll say Madame Web had a more interesting concept on paper, but it's just like there was just so many issues with this movie, and I think Sony just needs to stop with this Sonyverse. I mean, just like just stop doing it. I kind of lost faith in this universe after this. And look, I'm somebody that loves Venom Let There Be Carnage, and I understand the issues with that movie. I even, I enjoyed the first Venom movie for what it is. But this universe is just like, Sony just feels like they don't have an idea what they're doing. Here's another thing. I know this movie was originally going to be set in the Tom Holland world. And I think it was originally going to be set in the Andrew Garfield world, and then it was going to be set in Tom Holland world, and then it became its own thing. So this movie doesn't even feel like it's even connected to the Venom and Morbius movie. This pretty much feels like its own thing, because at the beginning of the movie, I think it takes place in 1973, and then it jumps forward. And look, this movie also feels like an early 2000s comic book movie in a bad way, though. Like, it's just, there's just so many, it's just, everything is really bad about this movie. Directing, acting, dialogue, story. Just overall, I can't recommend this movie. Like I said, like this or Megamind 2, or one of those two is the worst movie of the year for me personally. Like for me, I might give this a slight edge over Megamind 2 because of the directing in this movie. But they would be the worst movies of the year in my opinion, because it's just nothing about this movie really works for me personally. So that's my thoughts on Madame Web. Until next time, movie fans.